As I mentioned, we're the professional standard setting body for independent social compliance auditors and member firms. What I mean by independent is different people can do social compliance audits in the facilities, and I'll explain more later. Independent means third-party auditors, like you hire a plumber to come into your house and fix your plumbing. You hire an audit firm to go into a facility and audit for those human rights issues. APSCA's had really, really good success. We're up to 75 member firms, and those member firms are affiliated with over 5,000 auditors that do work in about 100 countries. And about 60% of them are what we call certified social compliance auditors. And we'll get into the difference between a certified social compliance auditor and someone else in a little bit when Kara Chan, our Director of Exams and Continuing Professional Development, talks about the process of becoming what we call a CSCA. Under our umbrella every year, there are about 200,000 social compliance audits that are conducted globally under our auspices. And what that means is those audits have to be done by auditors that are members of APSCA. Those audits have to be supervised by a CSCA. They have to be done by member firms following what we call our competency framework. Competency framework says these are the skills you exhibit as a CSCA. This is the process of doing a competent social compliance audit. We also have a code of conduct. It's a code of ethics for firms and for auditors, for anyone in the ecosystem. It's a code of ethics that can and should guide ethical behavior by everyone involved in the auditing ecosystem. And finally, APSCA is a growing global team. On the call, we have folks here from 3 countries, the US, Canada, Australia. We have folks in France, Copenhagen, and I'll let you in on a secret. We'll be expanding into Southeast Asia, hopefully by the end of the summer. So with that, let me just stop sharing for a second and kind of talk with you guys, and then I'll try to figure out how to get this back. But I want to start off by saying that this is actually the first time we've done a webinar like this. So really, really excited. I also apologize for any technical issues because I'm running it and I'm technologically challenged. But the reason this is the first time we're doing it is we understand that it's kind of a tumultuous time right now. And in my career, I've been blessed to work with a lot of current and former U.S. government folks, USAID folks around the world that in your own way, you've been doing human rights work one way or the other. And I've seen the value of it, and I've seen the skills that you bring to the table. And I am confident that the skills that made you successful in your previous life are going to make you successful should you decide to choose a career in human rights and social compliance. So the goal of today is to give you a basic understanding of what skills are needed, what is social compliance auditing, what are options of doing work in corporate human rights, how do I find a job? If this sounds interesting, what do I do? Where do I go? And so hopefully that is what we're going to achieve tonight. You're going to have a ton of questions about how the details of how social compliance auditing. We're not going to be able to answer all of them. The goal tonight is to give you just enough of a flavor that this sounds good, and then you can continue your journey after this. So I know you're going to have a lot of questions about processes and stuff. If we don't answer them, certainly reach out to some of the folks that are speaking today, reach out to the APSCA member firms, reach out to us. But if you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A, and we'll try to get some answers with that. So let me go back and with that share a little bit more with what is social compliance auditing. So basically, long story short, a social compliance audit is where an auditor or auditors go to a site, a factory, a farm, a fishing boat, whatever it may be, and assesses the treatment of the workers. Are they treated ethically? Are they treated legally? Are they treated fairly? At a high level, that's what they do. And they do it against a bunch of social and ethical practices that are out there. You're going to hear from one body that sets some of those standards wrap later. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of those standards out there. There's lots of laws and everything, but all of them boil down to the goal of ensuring fair treatment and that workers are in safe and fair conditions. The reason there are so many standards out there is that different brands, different retailers have different goals, have different focuses. There may be differences based on the industry that's being audited, or there may be differences based on the country that you're in, which is why there's so many standards out there. But all of those standards have one thing in common, is that they match APSCA's competency framework. They meet our definition of a competent social compliance audit. It checks all those boxes. So what are some of those boxes in a standard social compliance audit? Supervised by an APSCA certified auditor, and we'll hear more about how you become one in a second. Once you get to the site, the facility, what the auditors do is they have an opening meeting with management. They explain what's going to happen during the day. They typically do a health and safety tour of the factory. They'll review documents. They'll look at systems, things like time records, payroll records. Do those time and payroll records match up? They'll look at accident reports to see how things are safe, how safe things are at the factory. They'll talk to union representation and make sure freedom of association is being respected. Those are the types of things that happen at the factory. They'll then do employee interviews, worker interviews. If you've been an auditor, if you've been an inspector anywhere, I think the biggest difference between social compliance auditing and any other type of audit is the worker interview. You sit down face to face and you have conversations with workers trying to triangulate data between what you're told by management, what the documents say, and what the worker says. What's the truth of what's going on in the factory? And that's where the magic happens. It is a special skill set to be able to be effective at interviewing workers and getting them to reveal things that they may not want to reveal to someone who they just met. So that's where the magic happens, and you'll hear more a bit from Care about that. You then gather, analyze all this together, and then you compare what you found against the standard that you're auditing against. So what are some of the standards that are out there? Let me just run through a couple for you. So you're looking at labor practices for sure. Things like forced labor, child labor, harassment, discrimination, freedom of association. Those are issues that everyone takes a look at because those are the ones that will get the brands and retailers or whoever is commissioning the audit in reputational difficulty, legal difficulty, practical difficulty with the facility. But those are the things that will, maybe get your shipment detained by U.S. Customs. You're looking at health and safety. Health and safety, everything from protective equipment, how do you handle chemicals? Are the workplace conditions too hot, too humid? Do they have access to drinking water? Living conditions. Many factories have dormitories for foreign migrant labor that may be working there, or even local migrant labor. What are the dormitories like? Even though it's not a factory, if you're sort of within the four walls of the factory, or it's a facility that's provided by the factory for those workers, that's in scope of the audit. You're looking at not just life on the factory floor, life at dormitories as well. You're looking at management systems. Do they keep good records? Do they respond to grievances and complaints by workers? Even things like, do they have a schedule to maintain the worker bathrooms in a clean and sanitary way? Those are some options as well. So who does this work? And generally speaking, there are two types of auditors that do the work. One type is a third-party auditor. Those are the 75 member firms that are members of APSCA. So they are independent people that will come in and do the audit on behalf of someone commissioning the work. So, for example, my prior job, I used to work at LL Bean. When we had a new factory, sometimes we would hire an outside audit firm to come in, assess against a standard, and let us know what happens. That's an independent third-party auditor. The other big body of auditors that are out there are what called second-party auditors. So those are people that are brand auditors, like at LL Bean. We had our own LL Bean employees that did the same thing as third-party auditors, but they were employed by the people commissioning the work. So a lot of the standards are the same, but not independent because they're a little bit of a vested interest in the outcome. There are also, finally, again, some common frameworks and standards that are out there. You're going to hear from one of them later tonight, Rap. There are hundreds of them out there. Some of them are independent, some of them are sponsored by the government, some of them are industry specific, some of them are branded retailer specific. Again, all of them have at their core what you see on the screen are some basic requirements for doing a competent social compliance audit. So ultimately, this is, I'm going to stop sharing and talk face to face. So this is ultimately what we do and how we do it. Why does it matter? Why do we do it? Everyone who's going to talk after me is probably going to give you their opinion what motivates them personally and what motivates them professionally. For me, why I got into the industry, it was probably originally you kind of feel like you want to change the world. And I think there have been times where I've done it. Have I seen, issues like forced labor and child labor? I have, but the story that I always tell that motivates me even today is I was auditing in Sri Lanka, and there were people that were living in a dormitory, and we asked these workers, women mostly, away from home, away from family, in someone else's house. In this case, it was a dormitory. What could we do to make your life better? And I was waiting for, I want more money. It was, terrible working conditions. None of that was true. They wanted a mop and bucket. Mop and bucket. What do you mean a mop and bucket? The dormitory was in a jungle. They'd walk on a dirt path at the end of the day. They track mud in there, and the cleaning crew would only come, once every other day, and their space was dirty. So we talked to the management. We got them a mop and bucket so they could have more control over their living space, just a little bit more dignity. And sometimes that's the biggest victory. And that's what actually motivates me and why I still stay in this industry and why I'm trying to make social compliance auditing even better. So that's my personal journey. But for a lot of people, we want ethical supply chains. The people you're going to hear from today want ethical supply chains. That's part of the ethos of the companies that they work for. It helps avoid reputational damage. Certainly brands and retailers, no one wants to be in the news. So we want to do well in part to avoid that, but to make sure that auditing is done in a way that shows the good work we're doing on the ground translates well if we have to talk outside of it. And ultimately, we want to promote worker well-being. That is ultimately what we do. That's what we want to do. That's what our stakeholders, customers, everyone else wants us to do. So if you're someone who's looking for a job in the career and you're motivated by doing good, this is the right webinar for you. If you are, if you think you have a good sixth sense, if you like working with people who dress up in suits and ties, or some people who work on the front lines of factories, and you're equally comfortable with both, then I think you're in the right spot. If you have a skill set, communication skills, you know psychology, you write well, you're engaging, you're patient, you have a lot of those skills that I think are going to make you successful in this industry. So I'm excited that you're here. I hope that you get a lot out of today's webinar. Again, keep in mind the Q&A function as this goes. Please go ahead and write those in there. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to hand it over to Kara Chan, Director of Exams and Continuing Professional Development, to talk about ways that you can enter the profession as a social compliance auditor.
Thank you, Ross, and hello, everyone. Pleasure to meet you all here. Ross was able to provide you with a background and overview of what a social compliance audit is, and I'm going to take the next couple of minutes to introduce you to a day in the life as an auditor. Ross, if you can share your screen of the presentation, that would be great. There we go. Just bear with us a little. 1 second would be there. There you go. So on your screen, take a look at these photos for a moment, please. You might not notice anything special at first, at the first glance, but look closer. There are time cards on the right-hand side, upper right-hand side. And yes, those are two versions. They're double books. And somewhere in the middle, they're lock exits. They're being locked outside. And there are also pictures on the upper left-hand corner. As you can see, there's a crack of a production building. Wait, the lower right-hand corner there, are they barbed wires around a factory? Yes, not to keep people out, but to keep people in. Finally, do you see the child taking a nap due to over fatigue? Now, do you see what's wrong in those photos? And more importantly, do you want to be the person who uncovered these issues? Imagine walking into a factory, a farm, a workplace around the world, talking to workers, management, reviewing records, visiting sites, piecing together stories from what people say and what they don't say. If that kind of work sparks your curiosity, if you're someone who likes to dig a little deeper, you're in the right place, like Ross said earlier, to be in the social compliance auditing industry. So, next page. So, how do you become a certified social compliance auditor? Let me walk you through the 8 steps pathway to the profession. And I'm going to use the journey of Danny. Danny was always curious about how working conditions impact people's life. When she came across this profession called social compliance auditing, she decided to give it a try. So the first step of the path is to be employed by one of the APSCA member firms, whether as full-time, part-time, or freelance. So once hired, Danny began with classroom training. And this wasn't just by theory that you learn. She learned how to review documents critically. So the type of documents that Ross mentioned earlier, the payroll records, sometimes you look at the production records as well, shipment records to verify the working hours. And there are also other policy related documents on a number of issues. For example, whether there's any harassment, anti-harassment policies, discrimination, freedom of association, you name it. So that's part of the training process that you have to undergo. You also learn how to prepare for audits, how to ask the right questions in the right way, which is one of the core skills as an auditor because you need to interview workers. Now, after the classroom training, the next step, you will need to have field observations. Danny shadowed experienced auditors during actual audits. When she visited factories with the lead auditor or auditors, watching them how the interviews are conducted, how documents were reviewed, and how to spot important details during the site. After completing at least 3 audits, Danny worked with her member firm to enroll as an official ASCA, Associate Social Compliance Auditor. That means she could start contributing to audits, but always under the supervision of a certified social compliance auditor. So to move forward, Danny need to complete at least 20 audit days in the field. That's when Danny learned how to apply judgment, adapt to different situations, and start seeing not just the surface, but the underlying patterns. Then came the big milestone, the CSCA exam process, which is a 3 parts exam designed to test not just the knowledge, but the real world application. Danny took each part, learned along the way, and passed all 3 of them due to her dedication. With that, Danny became a certified social compliance auditor. But the journey doesn't end there. Each year, as a CSCA, you continue build skills through professional development, stay sharp and informed. So these are a series of steps. Each one build your confidence, your credibility, and your ability to make a difference. In a nutshell, these are 8 steps of journey. There are flexibility in how long it takes to achieve the process. Some may take longer than others, depending on the availability of the audits, where you are, which location whether you're in a remote area, whatnot, and your training plan, many other factors. But we have auditors who achieve this certified social compliance auditor level in as short as 2.5 months. And other also reported average of 6 to 12 months, really a wide range depending on many factors. But during this time, this period, you will be auditing as an associate social compliance auditor. If you worked in a role where observations, ethics, and people skills are key, you might find this path familiar. And if you're like Danny, being curious, determined, and ready to do meaningful work, this could be the beginning of your next chapter. All right, next step. Now that you have a better sense of the CSCA journey, let's talk about exam itself, which is a way of design to reflect the real work that auditor do. There are three parts of the exam. The first part is testing the core knowledge. You'll be taking a multiple choice true false questionnaire that tests your understanding of the fundamentals. Everything from labor laws, health and safety, international standards of labor conditions, to audit methods, ethical conduct. This part ensures you have the foundational knowledge to begin practicing with confidence. The second part of the exam is case-based scenario. This part simulates a real audit. You will review documents like the payroll, the time cards, consider legal requirements, and do a walkthrough in a facility visiting from the beginning to the end, interacting with workers, managers, spotting red flags, and analyzing evidence. It's about showing how you apply what you know in a realistic situation. Finally, part three exam, it's a role play worker interview scenario. This is where you step into auditor's shoes. You will participate in three live role play scenarios, such as meeting with the manager during the opening or ending of an audit, or interviewing with workers. It's a practical interactive test of your communication and investigation skills, how you ask questions, how you listen, respond, and think on your feet, just like a real audit. This isn't just about what you know on paper. The exam tests how you think, how you engage with people, how you apply your judgment in real life situation. All right, next, we're going to talk about what an auditor, now that you're a certified social compliance auditor, what makes you a good auditor? You don't need to be a legal expert or have years of experience in working in a factory or in a farm or in on site, but there are a few core strengths that really matter. First, it's being observant. Great auditors notice things that others miss, whether it's a lock emergency exit, inconsistent time records, or body language during a worker interview. What you see and what you don't see, they matters. Now, second, it's the investigative mindset. Social compliance issues are not always black and white. Auditors need to dig deep into the issue, look at patterns, root causes, not on the surface. Third, it's clear communication. You need to be able to ask the right questions, listen actively, explain findings in a way builds understanding, not defensiveness. Then there's critical thinking skills. You would take information from documents, interviews, observations, and connect the dots. The goal is not just spot issues, but understand what they really mean. And finally, professional integrity. This is the heart of all. A good auditor lead with fairness, confidentiality, and respect. It's not just what you do, it's how you do it. Integrity is what builds trust with workers, with companies, and within the profession itself. If any of this sounds like you or the kind of work that you already do, then social compliance auditing might not be a big leap after all. In fact, this might just be the right fit for you. And before we wrap up, I want to go to the next to talk about where you go if you if all this sparks your interest. We've got a number of resources on the AppScout website to help you explore the path further. First, there are the public available training courses that offered by the AppScout member firms and recognized training organizations. You can go visit and scroll through many courses there available. There are approximately 100 courses there for you to review, to learn. And it's a great start to build your foundational knowledge. If you're thinking about certification, you can access detailed guidance on our exam site, including practice materials that can help you each part. There's also a guidance document, and we also have the competency framework and as well as other useful information there to guide you through the process. Now, our AppSca resource library is also a go-to for important documents. They're the policy and guidance, as well as our code and standards of professional conducts, and other tools you can also find to help you navigate the journey. And if you're looking to start a field, check out our member firm hiring directory, which lists the countries where each firm operates and provide contact points. So you can contact them directly, send them email, and find out whether they have hiring in that region. So whether you're just getting curious or ready to jump in, we've got resources to support you every stage along the way. And we would love to see where this journey takes you. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Kara. That was really well done. I really, really appreciate it. Um, so that was a great overview on the APSCA CSCA journey. What I'd like to do now is broaden the scope a little bit and include some of the other major players in the social compliance auditing ecosystem. Um, Kara will talk about life as a social compliance auditor. I'm actually going to move her to the end and give her a chance to kind of get a drink of water and celebrate a really good job. But we have Joe Waitkovich from Amazon, and he'll talk about why Amazon gets involved in this space to begin with. Amazon is a member of APSCA's Stakeholder Advisory Board. Because we represent the industry, we want to make sure that we have all the major players in the auditing ecosystem represented. So Amazon is one of those companies that helps advise APSCA to help make social compliance auditing better. We'll then hear from Jen Thibault from Arch Advisors. Arch Advisors is a third-party audit firm. The president and CEO of Arch is also on our board of directors, but Jen can talk about life in an audit firm, what audit firms look for, what areas they engage in to support the auditing ecosystem. And then we'll turn it over to Rap and to Abidi Safarian, and they're an audit standard. So they're the ones that set the parameters of what an auditor is going to look for and how they do it once they're at the factory. Avidis is the chairperson of our board of directors as well, so intimately knowledgeable both about APSCA and certainly about the auditing industry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Joe, and before we get started, I'm going to stop sharing, and hopefully by now, Joe has turned his camera on, and once that happens, then I will pin him and I will let, oh, there he is. Joe, I'm going to
Here.
make you I'm going to spotlight you, and then I will let you take it from here.
It was great. Thanks so much, Ross. And it's great to virtually meet everybody. I'm super excited about this. I don't know if you saw, I came on camera a little bit early just because I think it's a little infectious, all the people that are interested in the social auditing space. So just excited to share my experience with you. A little bit of background on me. My name, as Ross said, is Joe Wakovich. I lead Amazon's global social assessment operations team. Our team, just to give you a little bit of understanding of what we do, we have two major work streams. One of those is that we evaluate and accept industry audits that align with our supply chain standards. That's a little bit about the multi-stakeholder initiatives that Ross was talking about earlier. And then we also oversee our own Amazon managed audit program, where we audit directly against our published supplier requirements called our supply chain standards. To do that, we work closely with third-party audit firms. I think Ross mentioned that there are some retail organizations out there that will utilize internal auditors. For us in the social auditing space, we rely strictly on third-party audit firms to maintain, a certain degree of distance from the social audits that are being conducted. To enhance both of those programs, we actually are currently experiencing with advanced technology, deeper technical integration, AI-powered tools, all with the objective of trying to help auditors and partners better identify and interpret risks, standardize reporting, surface critical insights, and get to a space where we can deploy audit resources in a way that they can have the greatest impact on worker well-being. As Ross mentioned, and I think has been mentioned by others, one of the things that is I'm most passionate about in this space is the opportunity to improve the experience of workers and some of the scale and opportunity that Amazon provides for that. As many of you, I'm sure, are aware, our Amazon global value chain is fairly complex. Our social audit operations span retail, private label manufacturing, logistics, service providers, cloud computing, digital media, just to name a few. To uphold our supply chains and standards and meet our goal of ensuring that every worker in the value chain is treated with dignity and respect, we operate a comprehensive audit and remediation system. The idea is not just to flag risk, but to drive improvement at scale. To make this work, our team brings together professionals from varied backgrounds. The folks on our centralized team come from sustainability, compliance, regulatory backgrounds, operational experts, folks from human rights and workplace safety. So lots of, in the space within Amazon, we really appreciate kind of varied experience that lends itself to, critical execution of the different areas of the social audit. And I think has been mentioned previously, social auditing is complex and encompasses a lot of different aspects and requires a certain degree of, analytical thinking and acute observation. Within our framework, there's a whole bunch of natural career progressions. And so my hope here was to kind of explain some of the career opportunities, both for, entry-level auditors that come into the Amazon ecosystem, as well as where we see, seasoned professionals enter our field and some of the kind of roles within our broader team that are available. And then I'll talk a little bit about the other areas across Amazon that exist and are available to folks. Generally, we have and hire directly from the auditing field folks into subject matter experts and process experts who are kind of the foundation of our audit work. These kind of roles do kind of detailed assessment and analysis. They interpret and map social audits to our scorecard, review our corrective action plans, and provide expertise in specific compliance areas. These folks require kind of strong analytical skills, thorough understanding of international labor standards, and as I mentioned, usually these are former auditors or in an entry-level position from auditors. These, as we kind of lean into these professionals and they develop operational expertise and they work with different audit firms, they often move into audit operations roles, remediation and escalation case managers, coordinating regional assessment programs, managing, the coordination with our third-party audit firms, and these roles tend to index higher on needing strong project management skills as well as deep industry expertise and the ability, because oftentimes they're regional or global in scale, to navigate, cultural nuances across the global supply chain. I think bears worth mentioning too that the reason that it's important for us in all of these roles to have sort of deep subject matter expertise is and I see this true in all of these kind of enterprise level, retailers or other entities that are conducting social audits, is that, we're evaluating our supply chain or our value chain across a number of different standards. And we have to do that to meet suppliers and engage them in a place where they are and not create a lot of audit fatigue by requiring multiple different types of audits. And so what happens as a result of that is we have to have industry experts that actually understand multiple methodologies and are able then to map that back to our own supply chain standards. And I think I mentioned that we do that through using a scorecard that allows us to kind of assess risk and normalize audit results so that we can look at our global value chain kind of holistically. The next kind of area that folks move to is global program management. This is where we have professionals that take ownership of entire audit streams. As an example, is leading our entire Amazon managed audit program, managing our industry association audit relationships and strategies to enhance program effectiveness. A lot of this is owning the tooling, vendor performance, lifecycle optimization. These roles require kind of not only strategic thinking and deep industry expertise, but the ability to balance multiple stakeholder needs. For anybody who's not familiar with kind of how Amazon operates, is we're a centralized team, but under the umbrella of Amazon, you have multiple different types of businesses that are operating, and many of them are operating different types of value chains, from whether or not we're supporting software teams or hardware teams or retail or Whole Foods. There's a bunch of different types of supply chains, and so the folks in these roles not only have to have the industry expertise, but also have to be able to navigate these different stakeholders and stakeholder needs to be able to adequately and accurately assess the risks that exist in their supply chain. Some of the other roles that we see people migrate to are global and regional remediation leadership focuses. The idea there is, engaging suppliers to resolve severe systemic issues, managing regional remediation teams, and leading supplier education and capacity building programs. These roles obviously require strong communication skills, ability to build trust, and upholding our standards. So navigating that, fine line. At the most senior levels within Amazon, there's kind of advanced strategic roles that are shaping our global approach through escalation management, policy leadership, business unit partnership, system innovation, global engagement. Each of these kind of building on the previous one and allowing professionals to grow from technical experts to strategic leaders over time. I think Ross is coming on, so maybe I'm getting close to the end of my time here. I'll just wrap up by saying, because I tend to be a little long-winded, Ross, I tried to write it all out so I wouldn't go too long. I think that the one thing that I would want to capture here is that to transition to a role at Amazon, the skills that are available for the skills that are inherent in a successful auditor are a lot of the skills that we're looking for. People who have complex stakeholder management, attention to detail, analytics. There are a couple areas that we see that people need to round out in order to successfully transition to Amazon too. And some of those, the kind of the high level ones are pairing the auditor skills with deep project management, Six Sigma, or some of the other skills that allow them to manage work streams, a degree of data fluency and tech fluency. What I mean by that is not being able to develop applications, but being able to manage, things like Excel or Tableau or dashboard reporting helps folks get a foot in the door into Amazon and opens up a wide array of other opportunities. I can cut it off there, Ross.
You did great, Joe. I think that if you had to cut yourself off to me tells me how much Amazon is interested in this space, how much resources and thought you put into doing good. And it's just a wonderful example of how Amazon works in this space. And there are hundreds, thousands of brands and retailers that I think Amazon is an example of that really take this work seriously. So thank you very much, Joe. Quick reminder, folks, please use the Q&A to put in any questions. If you're not familiar with Teams, because there's a million of these platforms, she was just thinking, whatever happened to Skype? Anyway, top center is Q&A. Please go ahead and use that Q&A to ask any questions that you have. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jen Tebow from Arch Advisors to talk about third-party audit firms.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Ross. Hi, everyone. It's so great to have so many people attend this. It's amazing. I am the Senior Director at Arch Advisors. I am based in Seattle. We're a global company. Basically, we, as Ross mentioned, we are an audit firm. Basically, ESG or social responsibility auditing advisory firm, and we do services worldwide. And basically, we're focused on the human rights and environmental impacts to people. So that is, as Ross mentioned, those sites could be, a farm, a factory, logistics, construction sites, mills, etc. And so it's really looking at, how are we improving the lives of the people that are touching products, services, and etc. But before I get into that, I thought I would just spend just a second on my background because some of the things I did that led me into this space, I think can maybe draw some, give it, maybe help you think about this as well. And I hate saying like how many years because it makes me feel old, but just to give you a quick view, when I was starting in this space, there wasn't people, going to school for this. Maybe people went to school for international business or relations, but there really wasn't a sustainability field like people went to school for, or people who've been in the industry long enough. But really, they were looking for people that could, some of the skills Joe mentioned, be a good project manager, but also being able to talk to factory managers worldwide. And that takes a skill. That takes a skill whether you're working at a brand or are you working as an auditor. And as you can imagine, you come across all kinds of individuals. Sometimes, depending on your role, if you are in a brand, you do need to have really great negotiation or being able to talk to someone, in that role that it was at Nordstrom that I started with, they needed someone who could talk to somebody who was in Turkey, someone that was in China, India, Italy. And so that really did span looking at different experiences and be able to learn and teach about what the labor standards or their code of conduct. Companies like Amazon and all, Nordstrom, where I worked at the time, they have a code of conduct. And so usually, looking at when you're auditing, you're looking at the local laws and you're looking at the person you're auditing for, the code of conduct or standards, international standards against. And so they needed someone who could speak about those standards and globally. And where I came from is I worked for an art college, and it was young in my career, and I got to travel around the world to these education fairs. Some of them were at embassies, promoting education in the United States. And I was able to, we rented like hotel room spaces, and I was presenting and, working with them to go. Before that, I was at a nonprofit where we wrote grants from USAID, and to have actually was also an education to have people come to the United States. And so I helped with those programs. And so some of those skills that I learned were very transferable into this space. And I worked with groups from Latin America and Asia, and I was able to kind of build on that. And I will say, as Ross mentioned earlier, is I really did want to, change a world or something that I could, what impact could I make? And I think whether you're an auditor or you're working in a brand, or I think that's something that links us together, is that we are looking to make something a little better. Especially when I was at Nordstrom, the philosophy was you leave it better than you found it. That was one of the Nordstrom founder of this retailer. And so we really believe that in our supply chain. And I had some couple very early examples of that where I was able to, I felt like make a very small difference, whether it be identifying that overtime pay was not being done, and I changed the payment structure so they could, workers could get overtime. I helped, banking, like making sure that they understood banking and how to get finances back home to their family in a safe way instead of paying off people, the middle people. It was hygiene, where a worker in China had a very sick child and she did not know how to care for herself or her child. And so we were able to teach hygiene, and she came up to me crying and speaking in Chinese, and through the interpreter, I heard her story. And so it's like, okay, those are some smaller impacts, and then there's obviously some bigger ones. So I think, whether you're day one in this industry or over 20 years in this industry, I think there's still a calling that I think is something special that continues. So I worked at Nordstrom in building their programs for over 10 years. And then funny enough, I did move to Amazon in their earlier days in their program, and that was really great. And through that process, I really loved helping companies build programs and look at their strategies and how can they implement them. And so the CEO approached me, and we went to Arch Advisors, and that's part of my role there. So my role went from brand to the auditing firm. And there's certainly lots of stories where people start as an auditor, and I can talk a little bit in our company how we see that, and then sometimes leave and go work for a brand. So that experience, we see people doing that throughout our industry, and I think depending on where you are in your career, where you are maybe with personal family needs, where what type of role. Some people want the flexibility that sometimes auditing can happen being in the field, and some people want to take that and work closer in a brand. So I think there's a lot of different paths, and not one of us probably has the exact same one, but it's definitely there, and we sometimes we talk about like how do you reduce audit fatigue, these factories getting audited over and over. And this industry just keeps growing as one, we're seeing sourcing decisions changing because the tariffs, frankly. So brands now are retailers are looking at countries that maybe they once weren't auditing. There's also countries where the risk level where brands didn't focus on. I think early in the industry, it was like, what's going on? Well, LA was sort of started a lot of it in the garment industry. But then it moved on to, okay, what's happening in China, what's happening in India, Southeast Asia, Bangladesh, and et cetera. And so now I think, the US has really blown up as one area. Europe, with some of the migration, of different labor, subcontracting, different layers of the tier. So in the beginning of the industry, really the focus was sort of that tier one. And now it's like, okay, what's happening from the raw materials? So as that scope changes, the need for auditors have really increased. The language skills. So as workers have moved around, those skills are really important. When we get an audit request, we look at, okay, first of all, what is the location? Are you coming on because I'm out of time already? Oh my God. Sorry, I knew it. I was all right. I'm going to speed it up. But what I wanted to say is the language skills are important. So it's important to so for example, in the US, if you have Spanish, or if you're in Europe, a lot of people have multiple languages. But I will say one of the areas that people have come to be auditors is starting as an interpreter. And they get really interested when they're attending an audit, and they're like, wow, this is a really interesting position. And so they will train. And so we hire people that meet a lot of these skills that we were talking about, but have never audited. And we start them at ground zero, day one. And we will walk them through the process that Kara went through. And they will team up with a lead auditor, and you're usually assigned a region that you are living in. Again, it was a global need. We're constantly hiring. We typically, when people come in with no auditing experience, we see that it takes them about 8 months to a year to get through all 3 exams, to have enough experience to be able to lead on their own. But in addition, really quick, and I will wrap up, I promise, there is also a need for trainers, people who have training experience, both internal and external. We have client managers. These are people that would, have the relationship with the different brands and retailers and look at their needs and then get their audits conducted. Schedulers, which I think is the hardest job, because it's like a puzzle, putting all those audit requests in the region and working with each supplier and the auditors to get them where they're supposed to be. Quality reviewers. So once the auditor writes the report, there's a reviewer. And so lots of different areas. I had more to say, but I am going to wrap up. But I think the path is there, and I think we are willing to walk people through that. I think it's a interesting time to be in this industry. I think different backgrounds are surely welcome and adds to the interesting components. I mean, you have foreign migrant workers coming into different countries, so you're really looking at expanding. But I will say an auditor travels, the last comment I'm going to make, the auditors do travel a lot. And so, there is time to, come home and do laundry and see your family or see your friends, whatever the situation is. But you're traveling, or you're auditing and traveling into the new location. There is time for report writing. Some people don't want to be full-time because they don't want to be on the road 3 weeks or more a month. Some people are like, I love to travel. Send me everywhere every day. I'm fine. So it does take a unique person that wants to be gone all the time, but every day is a new experience. And, most of us look like we all love our jobs. We're excited what each day brings. And so, auditors just they're not somebody who's going to sit at a desk. That's not their personality. They want to get out and see what's going on and be an investigator. So thank you, and appreciate being here today.
Good job, Jen. Thank you very much. And speaking of wrapping things up, I want to turn it over to Avadi Safarian, who's the president and CEO of Worldwide Responsible Accredited Production. So Avadi, without much more of an intro, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Ross. Excited to be part of this discussion, and I appreciate everyone taking time out of their day to join us for it. Apologies for the air traffic controller look. My desktop speaker, which was working fine all day and days, decided to conk out on me a few minutes into the webinar. So luckily I had a backup. And I make this point because it's actually quite representative of the life of an auditor. Things rarely, if ever, go to plan. It's always good to stay calm and just find another way to get the job done. My job now is to take as little time as possible so we can get to the Q&A part. And personally, I can avoid the dreaded specter of Ross showing back up on my screen. And fortunately for me, Joe and Jen have, and Ross and Kara before them have done a really great job kind of giving the groundwork of the space already. So I can concentrate on really the specific part of the ecosystem that I occupy. And so maybe I'll start, as Joe and Jen did, by briefly telling you a little bit about myself and my journey here. I'm Avedis Seferian, as Ross said. I'm the president and CEO of WRAP, Worldwide Responsible Accredited Production. We are one of those independent standard bodies that Ross referenced, and one of the sort of founding external players of APSCA. As you heard, I happen to be the chair of APSCA's board. We consider this organization extremely important and significant enough that we're devoting a big chunk of the CEO's time to serve in that capacity. My own background, if you'll promise not to hold it against me, I'll confess to being a lawyer. The beauty of this space, and you heard several of the speakers say this, is that there's no set path for entry, no particular background that you must bring with you. It's very accommodating to all kinds of educational or vocational paths into the space. Really, all it takes is that interest, that desire to do good, make a difference, and care about working conditions and human rights and labor rights. And of course, a degree in law is helpful in some practical ways as well. So I have been with WRAP for 21 years now. Unlike Jen, I don't mind admitting that I am getting old. It beats the alternative, if you ask me. But I've stayed this long because I do love it, and as again, you've heard many speakers mention, it is a job, a space that is very much dynamic, very evolving. You're not going to find yourself bored, I don't think, and that's kind of an attractive feature for certain personality types, including mine. WRAP as an organization focuses on the sewn products and sort of related industries. So we are sort of a specialist certification program. We set a standard and we validate that that standard is being met. Those working conditions are indeed in place at the factories around the world that we inspect through partnerships with third-party audit firms. You've heard from Arch, there's a whole bunch more others out there. And we require that all of our partners be APSCA members. All audit firms have to be in the APSCA universe. All the audits that are conducted under the WRAP auspices have to be led by a CSCA. And so we place great importance on the professional body that is APSCA. And perhaps, it would come as no surprise, for someone with my kind of background to be that dependent, because the entire legal profession, the entire medical profession, so many other professional spaces out there are built on the professionalism and ethics standards and expectations of the professional body, the Bar Association or APSCA. Joe and Jen covered quite effectively the range of different roles you might have in this space. This webinar is focused primarily on audits and auditors, but there's all kinds of other functions that are, directly or slightly more tangentially related to the space and could well accommodate a range of backgrounds and experiences. So whether it be on the planning side, on the review side, on the training side, on the capacity building side, on any other kind, obviously on the management side, there's all kinds of roles, and I'll talk a little bit about what the inside of a certification standard looks like from a roles perspective. But I do want to say that for those of you tuning in to hear about the role of an auditor itself, which is really a very challenging and very exciting job, I do want to say that it is not for everyone. right? Jen pointed out, for example, that there's a lot of travel involved, right? So if you're the kind that wants a job that's going to be dependably getting you home for dinner every day, social auditor might not be the best job for you. On the other hand, if you want one that will expose you to all kinds of interesting challenges and unique situations and puzzles that need to be, figured out, this is certainly a very invigorating and very engaging profession that calls for an incredibly wide range of skills, right? You have to be, part social worker, part, investigator, part, I don't know, if you're if you're auditing on a farm, for example, you have to have some idea of that space. Part safety inspector, part Sherlock Holmes, right? There's a lot of skills that have to be coming together, and it really, as I said, can make for a truly invigorating profession that then can lead to great career advancement in all kinds of directions, whether it be within an audit firm, rising up the ranks to manage the business, whether it be moving to the brand or retailer space, and you heard, as I said, Joe give you the range of options there, or you could come to a standard and then start to play a role in the setting of what the expectations are going to be at the factory and working with the monitoring firms that are going to do those audits for you to ensure that they're meeting their requirements in being able to validate the working conditions and advancing the mission of the organization, the nonprofit that is the standard setting body itself. My own staff are about a third of them are auditors themselves, and still do audits. We use our auditors mostly to do follow-ups on audits done by our third parties, and as a quality control measure. But the other 2/3 are on the sort of management side of things, a big staff that actually is the certification administration team. And then, of course, we have stakeholder engagement functions and other business support functions that will all benefit from audit experience and audit backgrounds, but you can come into that space with different levels of experience. And auditors tend to be, at least initially, on sort of the early part of their careers, on the younger side, to get into space. I know many people here are probably mid or even late career folks who would likely be looking at a role that isn't necessarily going to involve the functions and the rigors of an auditor, and there are such opportunities in the sort of management and support and additional fields that go along with the audits, and you could find them in the standard bodies as well, in addition to brands and retailers and audit firms too. So I think I will leave it at that, especially since Ross has not yet appeared on my screen, and make sure we use the rest of the time for questions that you all may have, and happy to play a role in answering them. So thank you again for the opportunity. Thank you for your interest in the field. It truly is an invigorating one, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you, Avidis. As promised, I'm going to turn it back over to Kara, who is a wonderful example of how career progression and advancement in this space can work. So, Kara, I'm going to turn it back to you briefly to talk about life as an auditor and your journey to becoming the director extraordinaire that you are.
Sure, thank you, Ross. And like Abby just said, we all wear multiple hats in our profession, right? So I'm going to take my hat as the director of exam, I'm a CPD, and put on my auditor hat for you. So I started my career as an auditor 25 years ago. Let me begin with the confession. I didn't grow up dreaming of becoming an auditor. In fact, I stumbled into this the way some people stumble into a pothole, completely unexpected and a little jarring. So one day I saw an ad. I don't remember the details much, but except two things that really stuck: willing to travel and compliance. So that was enough to spark my curiosity. A month later, I found myself inside a factory on the other side of the world, being locked in a room, literally, until I agreed to change the audit finding, to remove all the issues in the report. Spoiler, I did remove all the findings in front of the owner, but then later I put all those findings back in the report as soon as I left, safely. And guess what? I fell in love with this job. It's demanding, like like Jan said, and Joe and also Evie does mention as well. It's unpredictable. It's not for the faint of heart, but it's also one of the most rewarding thing I ever done. Since then, I learned how toys are made, how leather is tanned, how fruits are harvested, how toilets are molded, and yes, even how parking meters are built. I've been in the heart of production floors, the edges of forgotten work sites. I can tell you, there's never a dull moment. Let me share one that still some people ask. Did that really happen? So one day, my partner and I arrived at the factory to begin our audit. As soon as we stepped in, I noticed something strange. A group of workers stood up and started moving quickly away from us towards the end, down the stairs. While my partner walked towards the manager's office, I followed my guts and dashed toward the back door. I caught up with one of the workers casually and asked, hey, where are we going? Without looking at me, he muttered, "Hurry up and run! We're underage." Ooh, okay. So I asked him again, "So when do we come back?" He replied, still running at that time, "We hide until the auditors are gone." And it was that moment I knew it's time to go back upstairs, go into the office. So as soon as I turned around, climbed back up the stairs, there she was, a woman standing at the entrance, arms crossed, fire in her eyes, and she screamed at me, "You idiot! I told you to run when you see the auditors." And at that moment, I had to look straight in her eyes, lean in, and whisper to her, "I am the auditor, ma'am." Now, let me be honest. This job is not always rosy. There are days when audit report just couldn't come together. When your connecting flights is delayed and you're sleeping in the plastic chair at gate 47, like what Jen mentioned earlier. There are moments when no one will give you a straight answer and you feel like you're interviewing shadows. But then there are also days when you sit across from a worker who tells you, "Actually, no one ever asked me how I feel at work before." Those are the moments that remind you this work matters. It matters for people who can't always speak up. It matters for brands that want to do things better. Exactly like Joe mentioned, how Amazon wants to make a difference. And it matters for those of us who are curious, persistent, and just a little bit stubborn enough to chase a group of running kids down the stairs. So if you're someone who wants a job with purpose, who thrive in unexpected situation, who doesn't mind getting a little dust on your boots or a little heat from a manager, welcome. You just might be an auditor in the making. So that's my story. Thank you. Back to you, Ross.
I was ready to turn my camera back on. I didn't have to. So with that, thank you everyone. Before we go to Q&A, and again, the Q&A function is top screen middle. If you have any questions, there are a couple questions already in that we begin to ask. Let me show you, if I could, where to go on the APSCA website. If you're interested in a career with any one of these firms, let me show you where you can go ahead and take a look. So if you go to www.theapsca.org and you go to the member page, you'll come up with this connect with APSCA member firms. And then once you're there, and there's a video playing, once you're there, you'll be able to take a look at all of the 75 member firms that are currently hiring, and you can go and take a look at what countries they actually operate in. Just because it's an American firm or a French firm or a Brazilian firm, they may operate in a lot of different countries. So if you're a US person living abroad, you can go ahead and you don't have to necessarily take a U.S. auditing job, although they're definitely available, but you can take a look at where they're hiring, what programs they work for, and then you can hit a link to the HR contact at that member firm, and automatically you'll get an email and you can reach out to them and let them know that you're interested in a career. So we're trying to make it as easy for you as possible. And certainly you've taken a look at, you've heard ways of reaching out to our three outside presenters today for possible career options. So with that, let me just turn it over to all of you that are on the call to see if you have any other questions, comments about career progression, how to look for jobs, where job sites may be, skills, anything that we've talked about tonight or anything that we forgot to talk about, please, this is your opportunity to ask questions. Sarah, I will note that you asked about we'll be sharing this information. We will be sharing this out to you once we edit it up a little bit. We'll get it out to you the next few days. But yeah, any other questions? We do have APSCA staff that's monitoring the questions, so feel free to ask away.
Ross, I have some questions that have come into the Q&A. People are really curious to know, again, about credentials. Do you have to have a college degree to be an auditor?
Yeah, so before that, I think if all the speakers could turn on their camera, just as a reminder of what you may have spoken about. To answer that question, I guess, Kara, do you want to give that one a shot?
Oh, sure. So the requirement is not necessarily a 4-year college degree. We recognize that there are also other pathways that people take on to get vocational. So we do recognize a post-secondary degree as the minimum entry point.
Great. Another question that's come across that one of our panelists might want to take a stab at is also in regards to what are the different types of companies that may be hiring in the social compliance auditing industry? I think everyone presented some good feedback about that, but maybe we can run through that for our audience.
I can certainly take an effort at that. So I am first of all, I mean, I would take a look on LinkedIn, and I can certainly drop in a link or two here to people that post on LinkedIn regularly. What jobs are out there? They go through, they scour things, and they synthesize the jobs that are available. Just even looking today, it was everything from corporations to there was a UN agency that was hiring real estate developers are now getting into the human rights space and the community impact of the projects that they do. So the world of jobs that are out there, and I think Joe kind of hit at this, continues to expand. So, I mean, for me, if you look at, Google search terms like business and human rights, corporate social responsibility, social compliance auditing, ethical supply chains, any of these terms I think will yield some of these search results. But there's definitely a lot out there. But I'll see anyone else want to add in on that one.
Yeah, Ross, I'll jump in. I think that the one thing that I would add there, and I you hit the nail on the head. I mean, this space is expanding so rapidly that we're also, at least can speak from Amazon's perspective, we're rapidly exploring new oddity types, right? And so what that's unlocking is these massive areas that haven't historically been audited, at least not at scale, and expansion of social audit support staff within those companies to kind of help mitigate the risk. And so, I think the areas that we're looking inside of construction and transportation and service providers that extend beyond product manufacturing and have been done kind of historically, but not necessarily at scale. And so, thinking beyond traditional retailers, I think that there's a whole host of companies that want to find ways to hire professionals to help mitigate their risk in these areas.
Great, thanks, Joe. I think that a couple of questions have come in about where to apply to get started and how you can, if you can pursue this on your own. So it might be a good reminder of, Kara walked us through the path, but how to get started, just as a reminder.
So I'll take a step at it, and then perhaps we can pass it to Jen to give us a bit of that training piece. As to be a certified social compliance auditor, the first step is to be employed by one of the APSCA member audit firms. And so from that on, the member firm usually provides training for auditors. And so the 8 steps process that we mentioned earlier, that includes exams, or before exam, you actually need to be having the on-site training, on-the-job training, field observation, whatnot. So that's that.
Yeah, I know, just exactly that. And I think, again, I think the firms, just to meet the demand and expansion that Joe just referenced, I think there's a lot of hiring and, yeah, exactly. You're hired at first. Full-time, part-time, freelance, depending on the country you're in, there's a lot of different ways. And usually for us, for example, you start working with a regional manager to go through some interviews. Because the regional manager is responsible for training, you partner up. It's a long process and, to go through before you're a lead auditor. But most firms have a program, like a training program that walks them through if you're not already auditing.
Thanks, Jen. I think one question came in about those types of training programs and also about the audit, the exam costs. Do audit firms typically sponsor that for auditors who are under training and building their skill sets?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak for art. I think there's probably a lot of different models out there, but for us, we definitely auditors get a salary while they're being trained because they're going in as part of the audit team. They're just kind of the junior side of the team, but there's a lot of learnings to be had, traveling around and spending time in facilities. And usually, and then they're also partner with our training director team. So our trainers will walk them through, sort of the desktop part of the training, the classroom training, if you will. And then as you're ready to take the first exam, get the experience for the second, and et cetera. So it's kind of both classroom and in-field training, but most of the things you need to know are in the field. So you need to be in the field. So ready to, from day one, to help them get that experience.
Great. So we talked earlier about freelance versus full-time career, and if part-time positions are available, would anybody like to address that regarding different opportunities and levels of engagement that might be available for new positions?
Sure, I can continue for this one. So freelance, I can speak for our company. So as a freelance or an employee, for us, it's the same as far as onboarding. We have a lot of ethics and integrity statements that they need and code of conduct that they need to sign on. And so we want to make sure that, that there isn't a conflict of interest, for example. We certainly wouldn't want them employed by a factory, a part-time here, and then a part-time auditor or something like that, right? So it's important that they get the same training and part of the team. In some countries, there are more freelancers than there are people wanting to be hired full time for a variety of reasons. And some freelancers want to work for a couple of firms. Some freelancers are exclusive to us, but they just don't want to, they want to be able to work part-time and not full-time. So each auditor kind of has a unique set of skills as far as even things like how often they want to work, what languages do they speak, do they have experience in different industries that, like Joe was talking about, because we're looking at, logistics and transportation, construction, where are their backgrounds, that type of thing. We also do a lot of investigations and of whistleblowers. And so what kinds of experience are you bringing in? And so, yeah, so I think it just depends. That's why it starts with the regional manager, because they'll know for that region what type employee that they're looking for, and how does that fit in, and also what does that training path look like based on the skills you're bringing.
I think that's really helpful for potential applicants to be able to bring a set of questions to the member firms so that they can make sure it's a good match and that the position they're
Right.
looking for is really tailored for them and for their needs. Are there any other tips that Joe, Avadis, Ross, Kara, you'd like to provide in regards to, or Jen, you two can weigh in. If there's any additional questions or deep dives that as you're looking at the jobs that you should be looking for matches about location, language skills you mentioned, engagement for freelance and full employment are available. What about specific skill sets and industry sectors?
I'll take a crack at that, primarily because I'm going to give a very lawyerly answer. You've heard from a variety of speakers about some of the technical requirements, right? A post-secondary degree, depending on the market you're in, certain skill sets, language skills, all of that. Those are important. I don't want to give them short shrift or suggest that they are somewhat surmountable. But fundamentally, the thing you need to bring isn't necessarily a technical skill as much as it is a mindset. This is a job, a profession that is hard to define as, accountant or rocket scientist or brain surgeon, very specific. This actually requires a little bit of all those skills. Yes, even brain surgery. And so it's a mindset that is curious, is attentive, is open to learning, leans skeptical, but hopefully not in a jaded way, is a people person, is something that can go with the flow and adapt. So it's that mindset really that I think most people looking to hire are going to be most interested in exploring, rather than whether you check a particular technical box or not.
I'd like to add to that because, as my CEO Greg says, you're lied to every single day you're in a factory. If they weren't lying to you, then Amazon wouldn't need to send us in, because they could just believe what they write on a piece of paper and call it a day. So you are an investigator, you're a navigator, you're a self-starter, you're able to pivot when you're sniffing something out, it's like a little bit of, all those things and above. But I agree, you have to have kind of a sense of flexibility, and I don't know, kind of what's the word I'm looking for, but yeah, you do need to be able to, and also be professional when they're lying to you, or something's wrong, and then you also have to, if you're in a situation where you're not safe, you can leave, things like that. So there's a lot of day in the life of the auditor. My CEO has been auditing for 30 years and he loves it. Not many CEOs audit, but he does, because he loves that, like, that chase and understanding. And you're not always trying to necessarily will be a problem, but 9 times out of 10, there's something going on. It could even be a lack of a management system. Maybe it doesn't have to be so dramatic, but yeah, so I think it's willing to, and I think that's the exciting part of the job. But definitely, you have to be a bit outgoing, I think, or a little bit passionate about trying to unpack things and be able to talk to the workers all the way up to the owners.
I think that gives everybody a lot of inspiration, especially if this is appealing to you as you're hearing about how exciting of a position this can be, and it's such an interesting industry. One area that's a little sensitive to talk about, and that everyone seems to be liking the question the most, is, so how well are auditors compensated? I know we can't really say specific salary or anything like that because there's so many factors that go into it, but is it a well compensated position that would bring people over from these other industries?
I can say that the compensation has gone up. You know, and I think especially APSCA had something to do with that in a good way, because you are trying to have, this is a profession. Just as if you're, you know, a CPA or you're taking the bar exam, this is a profession that you are learning. So I think when you are going from, you know, a trainee, you know, through to getting your CSCA, there you do typically will receive a bump in pay because you are going to be leading. I think when, you know, I think that has driven up, you know, the pay model in a good way. I'm not, you know, and so I certainly think that, you know, offline there can be further discussions of that, but it's, I would say auditors are paid better today than they have been in the past, perhaps. Because the competition, we all need auditors, we're all growing. So I think that's another time, you know, a great time to be an auditor.
Yeah. It is, and Jen, I think that's a good place to start to wrap it up. It is a growing profession, and not just auditing. And I threw some stuff into the Q&A regarding some just examples of roles that are out there, and there are plenty, and it's growing. Despite sort of the tumultuous times we live in, you're hearing from people that care. This industry cares. We represent brands and retailers and standards that care. And the Abidi saying that it's a mindset is absolutely true. And one of the reasons we've targeted this webinar to you folks is I think you have that mindset. I think you are tailor-made for this industry, given your experience that you've had, that you're still having. I think you're ready-made for this sort of thing. So hopefully you are leaving this webinar with that same takeaway that I had coming in. I just want to throw out a few names. Tatum, Sarah, Paula, behind the scenes, you guys helped us to pull this together. You helped to inspire this. And let this not be the end of the conversation. It's the end of the webinar. But if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you want further information, everyone on the call is here to help. There are some links in the Q&A, and we will send out a recording and summary of this webinar to you in the next few days. But other than that, just let me say thank you for getting up early. You're staying up late wherever you're at. Take care, and thank you for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
What's the career opportunity? Once you've started, what's the next sort of growth process? Is that, do you have greater responsibility and the impact that you can have? And I'll combine it with a couple other questions that have come in about someone that has about 20 years of experience and in the language speaks English only. So if that can be, I know it's sort of two combined questions. I don't know who wants to take that on. Kara, I see you nodding. If there's anyone that wants to take on the career growth opportunity as an auditor.
Well, I'll take a step at it. And I, like Ross said, I am one of the examples, right? I work my way up as an auditor, but I still do audits, you know, the past couple of years, just to get my foot wet and to have the feel of it. So, yes, there are lots of different opportunities, and that's exactly why we have the different audience here from different organizations sharing with you. So I'm going to pass it on for the others.
So if I can go next.
Yes.
I'm also a former social compliance auditor, and I can talk to you a bit about career. I started doing social audits after 18 years working in a factory. First I learned how to do things on the shop floor. Then I moved into social compliance world, where I took all the steps from observer to junior auditor, then to lead auditor, senior expert. Had the chance to be technical manager also at the company I worked before, meaning that I was guiding other auditors and supporting them with the interpretation of the standards and how to do the audits on site, also training other auditors. And now I'm at Amfori, auditing the auditors and the auditing companies, also developing auditing standards. So there's a lot of career opportunities. It's if you're passionate for this, it's a world where you can grow everywhere.
Great. Thank you for those two answers. In terms of there's some questions that have come up about English being in the U.S. And speaking, or being in the U.S. only, or being English speaking in foreign countries. Anyone wants to take that on, Ross?
Yeah, let me give that a shot. There are a number of countries where the auditor shortage is particularly acute, and the United States is one of them. Which is not to say that it's English 100% of the time. You know, one of the benefits of the U.S. is you got people from all over the world. But I would say definitely if you want to stay in the U.S., be an auditor in the U.S., there are plenty of job opportunities. I think I saw, and I will, so I'll stop there. If you audit globally, it definitely becomes more complicated in terms of your language skill set. There are times where English is the language spoken at a factory in a country outside of the US, sometimes not. Sometimes even in the US, you need to speak multiple languages. I remember auditing at a factory in Georgia where we needed to speak English, Spanish, Burmese, Bangla, Nepalese, and I think there's one more. So a lot of times you are working not only by yourself, but you're working with an interpreter to help you understand both the words that are being said to you by the worker, but also some of those physical cues of when, in addition to what's being said. So anywhere where you work in the world, there's a good chance you'll be working with an interpreter to help you. But specifically, United States, we need probably hundreds of auditors today.
Yes, great point about auditor availability in the U.S. Maybe I'll switch it. I'll switch if there's anyone. Sorry, go ahead.
Cecile, can I add something?
Yes, of course.
I think that all the public that we have here need to know that there are two questions more that is very important for the career. Related, you are not a social compliance auditor that you are putting in the ocean. So you need to follow or you need to perform these audits on behalf of schemes. These schemes have their own rules. And for example, for the language, you need to be available for conduct at least 3 type of language for interview people, or if your company, or if you don't talk if you don't talk this language, you need to have someone that could help you. So there are some things related with language where you are based or where you can talk related with the company that you will have, that schemes have guidelines and some requirements that social compliance auditor need to comply. For the other hand, I want to put here the question related with your expertise in the legislation. So it means that even if you can travel around the world, you need to know very well the local language, the local law. Okay. So, okay, this is a great job, but don't think that you are travel around the world only do social compliance audits, because there are requirements behind that you need to fulfill. No local legislation. Some of them have part of environment also, so you need to know more or less the environment framework in the countries. So it means that you need to be aware of these. Okay, so okay, we can learn. We are here for learn, but sometimes it is very difficult to know everything about all the countries. It's impossible. And for perform a good quality social compliance audits, you need to have a good background related to labor laws and a few questions related with environment. So it's only these 2 topics that I want to add.
Yeah, thank you for that, Susanna, because there were questions that we can also add on this in this conversation on standards, particular set of standards for auditors. Is it sort of similar to the government auditor standards? It's something called GAGAS that Ross went ahead and answered, but basically it's different, and there's specific standards out there. If you can talk about schemes and standards that you have to follow? I don't know who wants to take that on, Sonia or.
Okay, this is a tricky question. It's the second time someone asks me this question today. And maybe it's
From
time
another
that
webinar.
if another stakeholders meeting. There is not this government standards that we need to fill in. So to start, we need to understand APSCA's code of ethic and comply with it. We need to go through all the exam process, and we need to follow also the standards of the companies we audit for and the schemes we audit against. So it's not one single document, but it's the sum of several inputs. On top of it, you need to understand deeply local laws, as Susanna mentioned, and comply with it also while you are navigating as an auditor, because you can't cross the lines of the law when you are auditing. Even if you would like to dig more, there are limits where you need to comply with. So unfortunately, there is no specific guidelines. The suggestion I can give to you is look at the competency framework. Thank you for highlighting it.
Yeah, we'll send it afterwards, a link to it.
Yeah, and that's a very good point to start. There you will understand what are the skills, what is the rules you need to follow, what's expected from you as a social compliance auditor, and what are the steps to become APSCA qualified and to maintain your proficiency. And on top of that, whatever comes up is to sum on these baseline requirements. It's to add on top. Okay, so hope I've managed to respond to your question.
Yeah. And if I may add on to that, perhaps as from an auditor point of view, that there as a social auditor, we audit against many different schemes and requirements, I would say. And in buckets, I would say some of them are program specific or scheme specific. For example, Sonia representing Enfori, and they have a scheme. And also Matthias, he also, represent another side, which is the brand side, and perhaps he can come in and speak a bit on that as well. So when we do audits and we have information that's given to us, what requirement to go against, and the code of conduct and whatnot. And so just want to add on that. Matzia, do you have anything that you would like to add?
No, as you directly said, for instance, Samsung, we audit our own companies as well as our suppliers according to the RBA Code of Conduct. The RBA is the Responsible Business Alliance, and the RBA is one code of conduct, similar like Enfori. And the auditors are not RBA auditors, but from audit firms. But they have to audit them according to the RBA Code of Conduct and to check whether the RBA Code of Conduct is complied with by the suppliers and actually also by Samsung itself. So Samsung factories itself are audited according to the RBA Code of Conduct by external auditors. Exactly.
So you build your own guidelines while you are building your experience as auditor, because every time you add on a scheme or an auditing company that you work with, you need to sum the requirements from that stakeholder onto your guidance, onto your guidelines, onto your minimum standard requirements.
Yes, it was it was the thing that I will highlight. So if you work for a company, or if you are a freelancer in a company, or you are an employee, you need to goes with the flows. You understand me? So if this is a profit company, so if we have more BSCI audits, we need to have more auditors for qualification. If we perform SEDEX or CLCP or other, or code of conduct for brands, so we are in constant learning. So and we can compare codes of conduct, we can compare frameworks. We can take out the best things from one to another one. So it means that if you work with and you should be you need to work with a company for the schemes, but you can learn a lot if you do more than one scheme. So it's very hard for us as a company that provides social compliance audits around the world for multiple frameworks. But it's also very interesting to understand that there are some things that are common for everyone. Human rights in the supply chain, and how to do with zero tolerance issues, how to save auditors from something that are not going well in the audit. And we have some guidelines for the auditors when they are in danger. First of all, send a message for a phone, for a number in the region. The other is not raise findings if they think that are in danger. If they communicate the findings, go to a safe place, and after that, okay, we will talk and to see what to do about the result of the audits. So first of all, safety for the auditors, not relate only with questions relate with bribery or some violence that sometimes managers has to the auditors, but also related with the conditions. We are not available to enter in a company that have lots of damage, like the carriage shows. So it means that our first safety, it's something very important, and we take care of lots of that. And it's the first step for perform an audit. The other one, it's in the end of the audits, everything was going well, but the manager that doesn't accept the findings, and we start to discuss, and the discussions are not completely controlled. So it's better to, okay, let's stop here. You have your opinion, so I will take out the findings, and then we will see what will happen. So first, the safety of the auditor.
Yes, that's come up in a question actually in terms of how are auditors generally received on site. Kara gave a bit of a story of that, and how the site managers, the attitude, the reception, working together, sort of the safety issue, and then some questions have come up also about women and men, and we can give that breakdown as well. How many women auditors are there versus men? I don't know. I know my chest. It's not a lot of questions on sort of Samsung or brand, but we'll get to you for sure, Kara, if you want to answer any of those.
Sure. I just want to jump in to comment about my story, and mind you that this happened almost 25, more than 25 years ago, right? And so, and as social compliance industry evolve, we have gone a long way in educating companies and letting know that expectation we're there to partner. So this, dangerous situation, if I would put that in a quotation, it's happened really rarely. It's just that I ran into that, but we have a lot of protocol and protection to help auditors to solve issues like that. And I want to address one of the questions that someone mentioned about gender ratio, and within APSCA, we have more than 5,000 social compliance auditor who are actively engaging in good standing, and we have about 40-60 ratio, right? 4 to 6, so 40% female, 60% males. It's quite equal in that sense, and we do cover 94 countries. We have member auditors in 94 countries speaking more than 100 languages. So regardless where you are located, joining us there, and as Cecile mentioned, that we have an audit firm that might be operating in that country. That's it for now.
Thank you, Kara. Yeah. And specifically on the, oh, sorry, Ross, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to follow up on sort of the challenges of auditing, and I agree with Kara. I've done a lot of audits myself, ran an audit firm within the company that I work for. Much more common is a little bit of reticence from the factory, right? It could be that they've been audited before or don't want to be audited. You know, in the United States, in my experience, some factories like, hey, I'm in the US. Why are you even here, right? I don't understand why we'd even need to be audited. It's certainly challenging, but you know, competent auditors can often work past that. And given the folks on the call, your personal experience, you've dealt with people that may not necessarily be psyched to see you, or the you know, but you can overcome that. And good auditors end up flipping that reticence to a positive. It's engaging. It's cooperative. So there are some times when audits can be challenging, but we see, you know, the competent auditors really are able to overcome that. The other thing I wanted to turn to, Cecilia, and I'm not sure where you're going, is I did want to address a question regarding, there was some question about entry level versus people with some more experience.
Yes, there are a lot of questions on that. And then as well, maybe combine those in terms of, can one take this on part-time or full-time? Can you start working while being receiving the training?
Well, I'll go ahead and start, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kara to talk about the APSCA certification process and a change that is likely coming. So you can be employed by an audit firm as an auditor. You can be employed by a brand or retailer. You can also be a freelance auditor. Once you are, yes, you can be a freelancer as well. The freelancers are definitely the minority of the situation. As you come onto the certification process, you do need to be sort of in a way sponsored, if not financially, at least from a performance and a capability perspective, sort of presented to APSCA as someone who that firm says, yes, this person has the skill set to succeed. So in that way, there is some sponsorship. But in terms of being employed, you can work for a firm, you can work as a freelancer, and obviously as a freelancer, you can take assignments as you deem necessary. In terms of number of audits, picking schedules, all that sort of stuff, that's probably more something for Susanna to answer. But before that, I did want to turn over to Kara in terms of like the exam process and can I work and get towards certification simultaneously. It's a good question.
Thank you. Real quick, we do have more than 75 member audit firms with that are with APSCA. So we have different situations. So many firms they provide excellent training programs, and so you don't have to have the background as a social compliance auditor to join. But you do need to be associated, or you need to be employed by one of the member audit firms in order to start the certification journey with us. So that's in a nutshell quickly.
Thank you, Kara. I'm just answering at the same time, but then I just want to see if there's any other, I think we talked about this. We can send this afterwards, but what question on where are auditors primarily based? It's worldwide, right? And so maybe we've got a little map and some information we'll provide afterwards. Breakdown of social auditors, men and women, we have that. I'm trying to see if there's any other questions that we didn't address.
Look, can I just address, there were some
Yes.
questions about, hey, I've been doing this. Someone say, no, I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't necessarily want to be an auditor. What else is out there? And certainly Matthias and I, and so, I mean, everyone here that's presenting has a lot of experience. We're just very few examples of a very broad industry of people that are hiring. While I was off camera, I was double dipping. I know I'm going to get yelled at for this. And I was looking at LinkedIn. I would take a look at LinkedIn early and often. There are plenty of jobs that are available. And I was just looking at another post recently to see that, and again, I'm not discriminating against anybody, but this is what popped up. Mars is hiring a human rights manager in Virginia. Alcoa is hiring a social performance senior advisor. The United Nations Population Fund is hiring a program advisor. Halion is hiring a senior manager for human rights procurement. So these are examples of jobs that are not auditing. We definitely need auditors playing more, but there are other jobs available. So I would take a look at LinkedIn. I am going to include in the chat simply one example of people who post these jobs on LinkedIn on a fairly regular basis. I'm not discriminating. If I'm missing someone, it's not intentional, but take a look and you'll start seeing certain people out there that post these jobs on a regular basis. But I'll put something in the chat as an example that you can look at in terms of where to go to, and also as an example of these jobs that are out there that are more in line with what Sonia and Matthias and AppScott are hiring for.
Yes, someone was asking.
If I can add here, just to Ross just said, auditing is not the end of the process for the CSR world. So if you don't want to be a social compliance auditor, but you still want to work in this field, there's a lot that you can do, from reviewing reports to manage supply chains in brands or retailers, to support with the business associations or the schemes to develop guidance. So there's a lot out there. I've just shared a few from M40 that are not for social auditors because there's conflict of interest. We can't do social audits anymore, but there are room there for in this world. That's the message we are trying to convey here. Also, thank you.
I'm going through. Well, we talked about this in terms of I think this is an interesting one in terms of what are the specific soft qualities. What specific soft qualities are needed to be a successful auditor beyond the technical knowledge?
So perhaps I can also jump in a bit. I touched base on that earlier. Being observant, it's very, very important. Identifying those red flags, whatnot. Investigative mindset, communicative, extremely important with managers, with workers, and even people around you, right? Conducting meetings and explaining findings. Critical thinking, it's one that we cannot stress enough. But finally, also this is the heart of all, is professionalism and integrity. Those are some of the highlights. And again, we do have the competency framework that Ross showed us on the screen earlier, which we can include when we send out any follow-ups information. And it outlines the soft skills that it's part of the competency framework.
Yes, definitely. Matthias, anything from your side on from a brand side, career opportunities, anything that you're willing to share?
Yeah, as I said before, I think there are a lot of opportunities, and LinkedIn is always a good source. As I said, Acre, the sustainability recruiter, is always make a call with them. Just send them your CV, speak with your CV through with them, and see what they have available, and at least they have you then on the radar when they come across in a position they need to fill. There was one question I saw, what is with the safety of workers who report an issue to an auditor? And for instance, for the RBA, every worker who is interviewed gets a QR code. So if anything happens afterwards in terms of retaliation or anything, he has to, but he can report it to RBA directly. So there are ways where workers after the social audit then can come back to the auditor to make sure that they can report there was any kind of issues afterwards, and then we will deal with it as the customer as well as then also as the social auditor firm. And the last thing is, when you look at people dealing in companies with human rights, they have really every kind of different backgrounds. These are people. My background, I studied nursing, worked as a nurse, then I studied philosophy, I studied history, all kind of different stuff, and now I'm ending up in Samsung. So I really think that in these kind of jobs you have all kind of career paths actually, and it's not only one way which leads to Rome, but many streets actually.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that information. and your personal background. It's interesting. Philosophy, nursing, Samsung. Wonderful. So we've got 10 more minutes. We can continue. I think now we're a lot of questions on, where can I send my resumes? What search terms did Ross use in your search on LinkedIn? Salary. Yes, I know. Although we're not a career portal, we're really here to help the industry and promote the industry, and we won't be able to take any resumes. Ross, I don't know if you want to address that, but we do have a search tool that the member firms have given HR contact details.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of questions when it comes to giving a sense of salary, but it's I know that's a tough one to answer.
It is a tough one to answer because, like Kara said, we've got auditors that are operating in a lot of different countries. And it's difficult, but definitely look at the APSCA website. You can search by which firms are operating in which countries, and then you can reach out to those HR contacts, and they can then talk with you about what jobs are available, sponsorship of the exam process. But I'm going to turn it over to Kara to give details because on what comes first, the job or the accreditation, because that seems to be someone said it sounds like a feedback loop, but it's not. So I take a look at the website for those jobs, reach out to those firms that are operating in the countries that you may want to, that you're located in. In terms of traveling around the world, I can certainly tell you that I've audited in plenty of other countries, even though I've been based in the US, that each firm, some firms do it differently. Some hire people and they stay within that particular country. Others will send auditors around the world. It really is up to that firm, their requirements and the scheme requirements. But do you need to be certified in order to start your audit journey? And I wanted to turn it over to Kara to answer that question.
All right, great. So I would like to reshare the slide here where it's the path to a certified social compliance auditor. So basically there are 8 steps in the process, right? You start really with being employed by one of the APSCA member firm, and they will provide, the firm will provide classroom training in addition to your background, your personal background, understanding in the areas of social compliance auditing. If not, many firms provide training for you.
That's the PC on?
Sorry. And the next step is then you will be sent out to do field.
Turn it on because I'm going to the gym now.
Sorry. Yeah. Please
Yeah.
turn off, mute your
Here.
mic. Yep. Thank you. So the next step will be field observations, and this is where you're being sent out to the field, to the site, to the plant, to the company, but you observe. You're an observer learning from the auditors. And after minimum of 3 observations, then you can be registered with APSCA to be the associate social compliance auditor. And in the process, and really depends on the availability of audits and how many audits are available for you to be out there in the country that you're located. But the minimum requirement is 20 person day on site. When we say on site, I know some of you ask what it means on site, meaning that you as an auditor physically being in the location, whether it's a service provider, a factory, or a farm, or wherever that location is, you have minimum of 20 days. With the combination of whether it's one day audit or 5-day audits, 10-day audits, and so you're completing that 20 days, then you can start the exam process. There are 3 exams: Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3 exams. You complete the exam, pass with minimum of 75%, that's the passing mark, the score, then you will become a certified social compliance auditor. Now, the process doesn't stop there. Even though you complete your tests, we do require our member auditors to have annual continued professional development, right? So minimum of 48 hours, including on-site audit experience. You have minimum of 2 days a year on site, very similar to many of the professions that we're talking about. And then there's also classroom training requirement as well. So that's the journey or the path to be a social compliance auditor.